So it's a very good experience for me to come to Antonia Center. It is well known that Antonia, or we call it Turkey, right, in history, had been made marvelous civilization and contributed greatly to the world civilization. And I wonder, I should say, many of you know their president, if I call it Kemal, yeah, and who is the great leader, integrate East and West. So that's why maybe they're one of the very reasons for Turkey be a modern state. So anyway, I'm very happy to come to the Antonia Center for Communications. And my topic today, I should say, revolving on the constructing of global collective identity, which is actually my something about my dissertation, PhD dissertation. So to save your time, I know you're very occupied, so I'll try to finish in a short time, and try to then after that I wish appreciate your more recommendations. Now I will read while playing this PPT. We only have one lady, right? So I only can call the lady and the gentleman. Distinguished guests, thanks for the invitation from Antonia Culture and Dialogue Center. My presentation today revolves around constructing a global identity, or termed as a world or global state. To make it clear, I will outline my presentation into three parts. The first part is about introductions on theories, on politics and system evolutions. The second part is focused on my 4 assumptions toward a global identity or world state. On the third part, I will try to touch on some practical issues, what we are facing, so as to give some recommendations for your references. Of course, finally, that I would like to have your recommendations so that it can improve this idea. Now, let's turn to the first part. Scholars in the social science have done a great deal of studies arguing for the organization of our current society as well as that the future, regardless of Gaullism or anti-Gaullism. Politicians, scholars, and religious leaders all share a teleological premise that human beings will evolve into an ideal society. Sometimes we call it heaven, paradise, or even communism. However, regarding the track or means of reaching such an ideal world, there are different arguments or preferences. So some preferences for students of international relations, as my major centers on international politics. So I talk about the 2 schools of international relations. There are 2 key schools of thoughts, which I call them pessimism and optimism. They are both attempting to interpret the future based on their perspectives or methodologies. Pessimism most side with realism, which could be traced to Thucydides in ancient Greece and Machiavelli in 13th century of Italy. There are two famous philosophers, and who have one point, making human beings, the nature of human beings, are dirty and selfish. So following such an idea, those realists, particularly the American political scientist Hans Jean Mogensen and Kenneth Waltz, John Mearsham, generated this classical realism as new realism or offensive realism, saying that the states would never stop struggling for power because of the continuous pursuit of their national interests. Accordingly, big powers would persistently defend their positions against any rising and challenging powers, like that the US regard China as a rising power, so that they would think of to contain or stop. Subject to realism, they're thinking any states, that means, are always seeking a balance of power to achieve safety or reduce security dilemma. They conclude either states will fight to each other among wars or after wars, or governed by an empire through hegemony, when all states have to succumb or submit their sovereignty to its hegemonic governance. On the other hand, there is a theory orientation called liberalism. There are diversified idealism or liberalism theories, but anyway, I just label them as optimism. For the time's sake, I only favor talking about assumption of moderate constructivism. Precisely, the constructivists are not in the classification of liberalism, but constructivism can be a liberalism or can be progressive. So I just, because of time, I just make a catalog into the optimism. And now, so this is just a review. You can see that it's for realism. I just went back. States there are 3 S. I always, when I do my teaching, I always tell my students 3 S. The first is state as a key agent in anarchy system, and second is security. Security dilemma is a self-prophecy, and third, survival is via balanced power. They are diversified realism, but the essence of realism, thus, it can be concluded into these 3 S. Okay, we talk about the constructivism. Constructivism agrees the states are living in the anarchic system. On one hand, and it highlights the role of ideas. As Winter famously argued, anarchy is what state makes of it. To be frank, I prefer constructivism for our human future. Based upon such an optimistic perspective, I argue the global collective identity could be constructed through human efforts and value integrations, thereby most likely generating a global identity or world state. You may ask, what is world state? Can we find any existence of the real facts for supporting such a scenario of world state in the current world? I think there are some. Here are just for a while. This is Alex Wind, a studied in Ohio State University for some time when I was doing my dissertation. And Winter was just giving me much encouragement. And he's a really nice professor. He showed me to the library, gave me some material. So I appreciate him help very much. So world state shares So world states shares a unique characteristic that human interests are interdependent, whereby global interests of national states will succumb to or be mingled to each other. If I give you a physical imagination or conception, that means all human beings share a value consensus over governance and diversified sovereignty. So you may ask, can we see this such scenario? Are there any practices in our current political system? My answer is yes. So see the running of the United Nations. Even though states are trying to maximize their interests under such anarchy, having more concerns over geopolitics or national interests, sovereign states are never giving up trying to peace seeking, peace talking, and peace building. From Middle East to Africa, North Korea, international society are always working for peace and development. And the UN is still progressing for renovation or reformations. And see the growing trend of the integrated global economic and political entities. The European Commission, the ASEAN, the African Economic Community, the American big markets, even though they are still experiencing challenges or facing difficulties, the development always brings us a confidence for future evolution of global markets or political entities. So this is, you may wonder, this is not enough. I will continue this for a substance before reviewing, just give you a review what I have just read. You know, this is the UN initiative, peace seeking, peace talking, peacekeeping, and peacemaking, peace building. The UN actually is, we may call it is a part or the early part of the world state. And also our globalized economic bodies, European Commission and the ASEAN, and diversified American markets, Africa Economic Community, and Central Asia Community, which I learned this from my trip. It's really trip. Wonderful French institutions, they are doing such in the Central Asia. So anyway, they are trying to do some communities. So now, let me go on with the 4 assumptions. First, the existence of an interdependent world, which is well known in theory and practice. The reality makes sovereign states have to succumb to their national interests, to global interests. Our world is not separated. Like Shakespeare said, the world is a big stage. Like it or not, we are one of the players. So history taught us we are now living in an international society other than a time of sovereign era. Back to the early 15th century, states were really isolated and unconnected. People knew little about the world beyond their own sphere. And the king or queen, they always proudly say, "Lady, c'est moi." In French, that means I'm the state. The state belongs to me. So that means states was totally under the control of a sovereign who was often considered holy and had absolute power over territory and its people. But the 30 Years' War, 1618 to 1648, generated our modern sovereign states since then, especially from 1793, as put forth by the late famous historian David Avers in his Global History. And he argued from prehistory to the 21st century, the world has been totally reshaped and reorganized. Not mentioning the technology development has brought our world untouchable. Of course, there are always some suspicion or doubts over the trend or reality of the globalization. Even for China, in the 1980s, people even feel suspicious of the term globalization legitimacy. They said, do we have a real globalization? Shall we use the globalization, this word? But now, changed. But see what we are experiencing, the changing pace of a globalized world. The concept of a global village is already a reality. Comparing our life to that of a decade ago, even a decade ago, you can imagine, our world is sharply different. We are now truly living in an interdependent world, whereby we are all, we can be called citizens of a global village, being interactive, vulnerable, and sensitive, almost in all fields. So to be a strong aware of interdependence reality, we human beings have to face or solve at least the two pending issues. Otherwise, we may face the destruction of states or catastrophes of our human civilizations. So let's just have a short review. So we are really now experiencing a global village. Now, let us see this ecology issue. We are truly experiencing global warming now. No one will deny that the ozone layer is being destroyed. The ice on the two poles of the Earth is melting. Sea levels are rising, resulting in many natural disasters. This also results in some unnatural disasters such as AIDS, HIV, that now we call HIV, SARS, hoof and mouth disease, bird flu, and other, maybe in the future, unknown diseases we may face in the future. And more living issues as food and house built need to be addressed. Sadly, despite the major breakthroughs brought by advanced technology and incessant efforts to explore our universe, we human beings still haven't found a second Earth. Although the big powers trying to do some exploring on the universe, but we didn't. No one said we found the second Earth. So how to save our home is a true issue. It is high time for human beings to use technology and money to avoid a sharp rise in temperatures that would wipe out species, raise ocean levels, wreak economic havoc, and trigger droughts, other than pursuing national interests alone. And secondly, the prevalence of using soft power. Interdependence relating to the promotion of soft power. On the surface, coexistence or living together is still a problem for nation states. Since the Second World War, sovereign states only draw little lessons, and there are states, some states, who still dreams of regaining imperialism. States also learn little experience over the ending of the Cold War. States never stop attempting to maximize their power in pursuing their relevant powers, fighting from land and sea to the space. The ending of the Cold War did not bring us actually the end of history or democratic peace. Ridiculously, it followed an era of terror in which suicide bombings had once become a daily topic. We also faced the dangers of mass spreading of nuclear and biological weapons, not mentioning we states are condemned being responsible for economic equality, financial crisis, democracy, and human rights. So shall we be pessimistic that states will never cease pursuing the hard power for resolving the security issues? Of course not. We have to be progressive. We need to be progressive or constructive, as in evidence. States are now preferring gaining soft power other than hard power. So now the soft power is a very popular discourse. No, I should say almost all the states trying to gain their influences by saying, oh, we are going to expanding the soft power. We must realize whatever advanced technology states may pursue, perpetual peace will not come about through seeking forced submission. What we have to think is how to advocate and in what means to take advantage of soft power for benefiting of our human world. Joseph Nye has argued soft power for management of conflicts and reconciliation of values. Yet, we need to ask whose soft power should succumb to. We have to pay attention to two problems. One is the distribution of soft power players. That is, not only we pay attention to big power players, but also the second layer countries. I wish you could catch it that not only the big powers soft power, but also the second layer countries. They are also sovereign states. So soft balancing are different, although they are related in essence. Soft balancing involves the formation of a limited diplomatic coalition or entities or second-tier powers, or sometimes we call it quasi-alliances. And what I emphasize, that is the balancing of soft power itself. Whose soft power? And Chinese philosophy, Confucianism, and Taoism are enlightened for mediating some differences. So we just give a small review. Two issues concerned. Soft balance. Don't forget the second layer countries. Turkey can be the second layer country, right? And there are many others. So big powers, sometimes striving for their interests, they might forget some other second layer countries. And secondly, balance soft power. Remember the diversified cultures. You cannot see, oh, your culture or your tradition is superior to others. So now, let us see the second assumption, that is human nature can be constructed. You may wonder how nature of biological human beings are constructed. This might be always asked by some the Abraham believers. I would say this refers to social character. No one would deny as being our human consciousness and ethics have been greatly improved collectively. I mean as a collective entity in terms of organization, state, or system. This is because studies of human nature are always a good starting point in probing into the social sciences. Most of the leading writers in philosophy, sociology, psychology, and anthropology agree that human nature is significant in understanding the essence of human beings. The great philosopher Aristotle once said that human beings are political animals. Even Marxism is in good company with this analysis of human nature. I would argue that the nature of human beings can be constructed regardless of being good or evil. So my understanding largely centers on the following premises. First, human beings are social animals. The innate or characteristics of social animals are of intelligence, rationality, and morality. On the long path of human evolution, the human brain became capable of learning, observing, and preserving, allowing human beings to use their brains to guide their behavior or purpose, which is unique to human beings. Some may argue that apes or chimpanzees are also intelligent and capable of learning and observing. Yet, scientists have experienced and observed that they are quite different in levels and complexity. Apes or chimpanzees might be educatable, but are incapable of complicated labor. What's more, human beings can intentionally use their brains for purpose and gain knowledge through intentional labor, of which non-human animals are intrinsically incapable. Human beings are moral animals with an awareness of wrong, right, good, and evil. So Confucius argues that what differentiates human being from animal is their awareness of benevolence, justice, intelligence, and fidelity. Other ancient philosophers from East and West agree to this as well. So let's just have a short review. Studies of human nature are indeed a good starting point in probing into the social sciences. Most of the leading writers in philosophy, sociology, psychology, and anthropology agree that human nature is significant in understanding the essence of our human beings, our society. So I mentioned Aristotle. Human beings are social animals. And secondly, human beings can cultivate cultures. Cultures are compositions of human spiritual products, such as the arts, literature, fashion, and architecture. Human beings not only share similarities in their genes, but also in their cultural orientations. Now, I would say religion can be a product of culture. Religion all share common characteristics such as teaching kindness, being considerate, and abandoning revenge or violence. So interfaith activities are possible and practical. Therefore, no God but God, no fated clash among civilizations. I guess maybe some of you know this book, learned this book called No God But God. I stayed in Istanbul airport and I found this book, so I quoted it here. No God But God. You can check the book. This is the book. maybe there are some more significant meanings for the writer. So neither religions nor secular fundamentalism can be means for reaching peace, but a true revival space of collective identity that could unify, may refresh our consciousness and transform our society. Now, let me come my third assumption over toward constructing a global state. That is, social norms can be constructed. This argument is actually part of above-mentioned premise or my consistent argument of the human nature, that social norms to some degree reflect the essence of human nature. Human needs will motivate people to make rules, regulations, and principles. Establishing norms is a basic task of human activities. As the development of norms, to some extent, reflect the development of human society and plays a significant role in generating the progress of human history. By this principle, I would argue that norms are developmental or evolutionary, constructible through human effort. To say that norms are developmental or evolutionary means calling our attention to the fact that norms are not inborn or natural. That means being constructed. If we apply human construction of human organization to the development of norms construction, we would find a state or country are not only principal agent or creator of human being, but also the evolution of norms. That means states are norms too. As in the very beginning, human beings had no states. Instead, they followed a holy man or divine leader, later a king or queen. So that's why we had the Westphalian system. We had nationalism and modern states. And these facts are very clear to us, and I need not go further here. As such, a state can be regarded as a person too. That's what is called a human state. States have acted to construct norms in two functional aspects. First, the state has the ability and administrative functions to make and enforce norms. So the state acted as both an inner and outer force in establishing norms. Regarding the internal aspect of establishing norms, this refers mostly to the sense of duty or of what a citizen ought to do. For example, the state calls upon its people to follow traffic rules, the traffic ministry, right? To protect the social order. If there were no regulations about the green and red lights, no rules about the credit, no rules about the traffic, the same about the letter of credit in business beginnings. On the other hand, states can use their capability to enforce rules. They have mechanisms to maintain the norms. We now have millions norms, thousands of millions, I should say, available in the globe, which allow our world into order, peace, and development. We also need paying attention to the roles played by the religious forces. So I mentioned the religious forces again here. As Professor Rafi Aliyev from Azerbaijan, whom I met in last December in Israel, he advocated good interactions between power, society, and religion. So he wrote this book, Power, Society, and Religion. Same, Martin Luther King Jr. told us Religion's community could help a divided nation find a common ground by moving to higher ground. If we make good relations, religion will not fall neatly into right and left categories. True religion symbolizes justice, equality, and responsibility, which accord with state purposes for constructing norms. So states, I just fastly. Now, finally, my last assumption, social identity can be constructed. How social identity construction theories apply to state or global identity construction, you may ask. First, I would like to give you an example of the development from childhood to adulthood in terms of identity extension. In terms of social psychology, when an infant is born, he or she has no consciousness of identity. In the process of growth, the infant begins to have a sense of feeling for others. Usually, the first person the newborn baby contacts will be the infant's mother, or someone such as a nurse or babysitter. Of course, some studies also show that the other might be produced when the infant or baby sees himself first time in the mirror. Such cognitive perception might be further extended when the baby becomes consciousness of his or her surroundings, the environments of strangers or people with special features. For example, people wearing glasses, facial birthmarks, mustache, and so on. When a child grows older, his or her perception will further extend, and gradually the child will be able to identify people as male or female and have some preference over certain persons or foods. These developments will amplify when a child goes to school, where they will cultivate or be directed towards their hobbies, interests in certain subjects or fields, which in the following years will help develop their future identities, such as being an expert, scholar, or other professionals. So let's see the infant, baby, teenage, adult, their identity will be changed accordingly. Saying that human beings tend to be socially oriented emphasize their group orientation, its tendency to bind themselves to a group so as to enlarge their identification. This innate ability of identity extension has existed thousands of years. Excuse me. Our ancestors at the very beginning formed groups and tribes in hunting wild animals. They elected tribal leaders so as to guide them for more efficient living. They circled their hunting fields to keep their territory guarded. They made rules that females would raise children and males would do hard labor. They initiated a system of pairing and mating, moving from polygamy to monogamy in order to normalize their lives, systems of labor and society. So later, as family-based society emerged, they made rules for marriage, for constraining women to do more social activities. First, the Chinese feet binding, and so on. With the expansion of families, there involved the ideal society of agriculture and later city-states, religion states, and the national states. Hence, human beings as social animals form families, tribes, groups, teams, villages, city-states, and states, national states, and a common market and a global state. So to emphasize, that's why Winter argues state can be a person. The state will naturally amplify collectively in the process of being globalized when human beings have to share or enjoy one identity in the form of a world or global state. So state has a purpose. We are now within the post-sovereign states, and I believe that we will have world state identity in the future. So now the final part, the conclusion. The above mentioned four arguments of the reality of the interdependent world, the construction of human nature, social norms, social identity have been served for supporting my argument that a global collective identity can be constructed. Human society is teleological rather than static. Our world has made much progress compared to 500 years ago. So the world state can be possibly realized eventually. On the other hand, in the process of global identity construction, the state as a key agent in the current world has to pay attention to other growing roles played by democratic forces such as NGO, institutions, and some other regimes, realizing that power, society, and religion can interact and help each other, as I mentioned just now. On a system level, one culture can't override another culture. East and West, Oriental and Occidental, have shared wide identity and interests. We are human beings seeking happiness and development. Hence, why not a world state or world citizen in the future? So, let me conclude my presentation by quoting Erwin Laszlo's argument. The evidence of science tells us of our human world will eventually evolve into a global society of one social, cultural, and technological system if we don't face certain disasters. This system of world society will be composed of different levels, from small villages, countryside, communities, towns, districts, provinces, to the subcontinent and all federal states, as well as the whole earth. Each regime will coordinate in good order, whereby in information, energy, materials will flow naturally and run well around the globe. So this is our future. Thank you very much for your attention.